Everybody, so I made a video about how to sew these Olson mask patterns not too long ago. I've gotten a ton of views, bunch of new subscribers, thanks for all that. I've also gotten a lot of very good feedback. It was my first time ever really making any kind of tutorial video, so there were a lot of kind of miswordings I had and some instructions that weren't entirely clear. And so I've taken everyone's comments into account, and based off of that, I decided to make a new video with a little more updated information, something that clearing up a couple things there. So, as I mentioned, this tutorial is for the Olson mask patterns that are from the UnityPoint Health Clinic website. And some people have had issues with the links in the description of the links for the masks not showing up properly or anything like that. You really should be able to go onto Google if it's not working for you and just Google Olson mask pattern. It should be the first two links that show up for you. It should pop up a PDF file. I'm not terribly well versed in how the internet works. For my age, it's pretty shameful, but you know what? We just do what we can, right? So with the Olson mask tutorial, I've made the first video because the instructions are extremely weird and unclear. The pattern pieces were weird. I saw that there's like a revised pattern out there as well, which I still found that to be equally as confusing. So I'm just pretty much remaking my old video based off of the original patterns that I used. And then I will also be adding how to sew hair ties, elastics onto the ends of the masks to hold them onto your face. And I only recommend doing that if you're making the masks not for healthcare facilities. Most hospitals and healthcare facilities will be adding their own elastic, their own ties and everything to better adjust to people's sizes. So adding elastic on your own, do that only if you're sewing it for family, friends, pretty much for personal reasons. Okay, so let's get started. One thing that you're going to notice with the patterns is that the actual pattern pieces, there are 6 total, as you see all here, and I'm assuming that they did 6 pattern pieces because I think they're under the assumption that we're going to be cutting the fabric on just one layer of fabric. So the more efficient thing to do, and just kind of the quicker thing, is to print just three of the patterns. You want one big one and 2 smaller ones. And you instead are going to want to, instead of cutting on one layer of fabric, you're going to want to fold that fabric in half and cut on 2 layers of fabric. Then you have all the pattern pieces you need and half the paper. So, several comments that were made on my last video were that the fabric I used initially was all just like a very solid red fabric, and it made it hard for some people to figure out, what pattern piece is what. It wasn't really something I had considered. I just kind of made the video on the fly because I just wanted to get it out there so that people could kind of start helping to make some masks. So what I did this time was I used 3 different colors of fabric. This is more of a white, it's kind of a tan. Now that's on the video, it's kind of hard to tell. And then another red one. Unfortunately, all the fabric that I have don't really have a right or wrong side, so that could be a little tricky to tell in the video. Most likely you'll see a right and wrong side if you are using any kind of printed fabric, any kind of fabric with a pattern on it. Pretty much the right side is the side where the pattern or print is most colorful, most prominent. Wrong side is where it's a little bit more faded. Okay, so how we do this, let's angle a little bit better here. How we're going to start is, none of my thread matches either, it's really just pretty haphazard here again, so The first thing we're going to want to do is you're going to want to take your big mask pattern, so face one here, and with the right sides together, you're going to sew along this curved front here. And the seam allowance on the pattern pieces are at 1/4 of an inch, so you're going to, ideally want to follow that. If I'm not sure how the patterns are supposed to differ if you're making them for kids, these are more adult sizes. I haven't seen any kids ones out there. I know there are tutorials on how to make similar masks that can fit all sorts of face sizes, but these are just the standard adult Olson masks. Okay, so I'm going to start with sewing along that front curve. And I will still be providing the links in the description for the mask patterns. So the next thing we're going to do, we sewed the front of the mask, so that's the outer shell. So now it's time for the inner kind of lining parts. And these masks do have a little pocket insert, so I'm going to be elaborating some important steps to make sure that you have the opening for the pockets to go into. So you're going to grab your mouth one piece, and then same as the outer fabric, you're going to sew along this outer curve here at 1/4 of an inch. Right sides together, of course. And so before you get to any other part here, the instructions specify to take these ends here and fold them over. That way you get a nice clean edge on the outside there. If you have fabric that tends to fray easily, if you have an overlock machine, you can run it through there and fold it over and stitch it, or you could just do a couple of tight little rolls there, do like a double rolled hem. Just to kind of help seal the edge there. It's mostly because when you launder the masks, then over time the fabric is going to start fraying. So anything we can do to get that slowed down is a good idea. I'm going to go ahead, I have an overlock machine, I'm just lazy right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a double roll. You're going to, of course, want to roll it to the wrong side of the fabric, so towards that seam there. You're going to want to do that on both ends. Okay, and then there is your front piece for the center. Set that aside. So then the next piece you're going to want to grab is the cheek piece here. And so where this dotted line is pretty much where when you go to sew it onto this piece that we just sewed, they're going to be overlapping each other, and so the edge of this is supposed to line up with that dotted line there. And so at the tops there, I cut a couple of little notches there, or at the top and at the bottom. That way it'll help us to properly align the pieces afterwards. For these cheek pieces, we're going to want to do the same thing as we did on the edges of this piece here, is you're going to want to fold them and sew them down. So go ahead and do that tight roll again, or like I mentioned, if you want to put it under the overlock / serger machine, you're welcome to do that. Mine is just very noisy, so that's another reason why you don't want to use it. We'll want to do that to the other piece too. All right, so what we do now, so you're going to take your front piece here and then one of your cheek pieces, And you're going to kind of, so these are both the right sides, you're going to kind of overlap the front piece over the cheek piece there. And then the edge of that front piece, you're going to want to line that up with the notch there. I don't always entirely follow the notches. I kind of tend, especially since I double rolled it, then the notch may not be quite as precise as it needs to be. So I really just kind of start lining up the cheek piece and the front mouth piece so that they just line up nice and evenly at the top and at the bottom there and lay nice and flush with each other. So on the instructions, at this point, what you're gonna do is you're gonna essentially tack the pieces together. So at like 1/8 of an inch up here, you're just gonna do a little tack there. Same with at the bottom, you're gonna do that on 4 corners. It's very, very vital that you do not sew down this front piece here, because the hospitals and healthcare centers do need to be able to insert filters into the little pocket there. So you're going to want to keep that open. When it comes to tacking this down, you don't have to backstitch at all. Just throw a couple stitches in just to hold it in place, because it helps sewing the front piece easier versus having all these pattern pieces just kind of hanging around. And then to make sure that everything is lining up properly, after I have the first cheek piece tacked onto the front here and I start lining up the other one, I like to make sure that, you know, the ends of the cheek pieces are lined up. That helps me to kind of figure out the alignment, how the alignment should be with the other cheek piece there. Say cheek piece 5 times fast. Okay, so got all 4 cheek pieces just kind of tacked on there. Have little openings in there for the pockets, for the filters too. So now what we do is we're going to come back to our very first set that we sewed, and we're going to take both of our complete kind of components and pin them right sides together. I always like to start at the center seam there in the front. I'm just going to kind of line everything up there. I've noticed that, and it could just be because I sometimes do a sloppy cutting job, but sometimes the pattern sizes don't always match up perfectly. Oftentimes the white outer fabric ends up being a little bit larger than the other components. Not a big deal, as long as you get the front seams lined up there, and then in general, as long as it's laying all nice and flat and cohesive, it's okay if there's a little bit of overhang there. So what you're going to do at this step is you're going to sew, this is the one where you're going to sew all the way around all the sides of the mask here, and the reason you're going to sew all the way around and not leave an opening is because you're going to be flipping it right side out from the pocket opening here. So go ahead and stitch all the way around at 1/4 of an inch. Alright, so yep, there's a little bit of overhang kind of on some of the edges there. If you want to trim that, feel free to. If it's not anything super dramatic of a difference, I wouldn't worry too much about it. So what you can do now is along the corners there, if you want to cut the fabric at kind of a 45-degree angle, that'll help to, when you flip the mask right side out, then it'll help to sharpen the corners a little bit more. It's not vital by any means. As I mentioned in my last video, these aren't supposed to be like couture level masks, they're just supposed to function. But it's just force of habit for me, so. Alright, so I clip my 4 corners, and what you do then is it takes a little bit of finagling, but you're going to get into the pocket there, little opening, just going to flip it right side out. And then if you want to take any kind of like blunt object, like it's kind of a corner pusher, go ahead and push that into the corners, help sharpen those a little bit more. All right, and then there is your finished mask. I always like to put it under my iron, get it to lay a little bit flatter, look a little neater there. But once you get the instructions down, it's pretty easy to do. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to sew the elastic onto the masks. So I kept hearing hacks or tricks about buying like thin elastic headbands and kind of cutting those in half and sewing them onto the headband, onto the masks and everything. I can't find headbands anywhere to save my life. All the ones that that work for these masks, they're gone everywhere. So I instead bought a bunch of these kind of thinner hair ties for fine hair. I wouldn't recommend using regular hair ties. They're very bulky, they're very stiff. It's going to be very uncomfortable wearing them for a short period of time, so I find these ones are a little bit more tolerable. They're not the best, but they'll hold up better to laundering versus if you use elastic like similar elastic to what they use at hospitals. Those are meant to be disposable. They're not supposed to be laundered or worn more than once, so these will hold up a little better. With that, I will recommend that when you wash these masks, wash it on, you should be able to wash them in hot water. That'll help sanitize them. As for drying them, I would recommend either just hanging them to dry or drying them on low heat because you don't want the elastic to break down or melt or anything. And for the love of God, do not put your mask in the microwave. Don't put them in a Ziploc bag in the microwave. That is one of the worst hacks I've ever heard of in my entire life. Please do not do that. I'm not going to condone house fires. So just had to kind of put that in there. So you're going to take 2 of them. And it's a pretty simple thing to do. So you're going to loop the hair tie around the end there. If you can see that at all, kind of dark. And then you're going to flip the end over about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. It's not perfect sizing. If you need to take the hair tie out and kind of flip it in more or less according to whose ever head it's going to be on, you can do that. It's pretty easy to rip the stitching out, but you know, I just do a standard 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. So yeah, you're going to flip that over and then you're going to stitch along the edge there. Just do a nice kind of top stitch there. And then you're going to do the same with the other side. Okay. There are your hair ties there. Once you're ready to wear it, just going to hook it on like that. If you want to use double-sided tape to help kind of better close this off up here, you are welcome to do that. There is some skin-safe double-sided adhesive tape out there. I know that like Walmart, Joann's is still open. They sell some there. But otherwise, before you wear these masks, if you're making them for friends and family and yourself, I do recommend laundering them first to help get them nice and sanitized since your hands have been all over them. Otherwise, hospitals and healthcare centers, they should be laundering it themselves. This shouldn't be something you have to worry about at all. And otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty easy tutorial. I tend to like these masks better than the rectangle ones that are out there because this one contours to your face a little bit better, so I feel like it gets a little bit better of a seal. I'm not a doctor, that's just my personal opinion. So, I hope that this tutorial will help out more people. I really appreciate the feedback that I've gotten from my last video. The reason I decided to make that first video is because the instructions for the Olson mask were very weird, very unclear. I'm more of a visual learner, so it took me a while to decipher what they were saying. I knew other people were going to have the same struggle, so I decided I just want to help as many people as I can. Again, really appreciate the feedback and just kind of noting some things I should have worded differently or even some errors that I made. Like I mentioned, I'm new to doing all of this, so I just kind of did it on the fly just to get it done with. So I hope that this video can help you guys a little bit more. Stay safe out there, and tomorrow's Easter, so happy Easter if you celebrate that, and practice safe hygiene.